The Panasonic 3DO was certainly a game console. If you don't know me, my name's Cha Cha Retro. I take old game consoles and I like to modify them and bring them up to more modern standards. For consoles like the GameCube, the Super Nintendo, the PlayStation 3, there's a lot of options to do that, but for more obscure consoles like the 3DO, you're usually a little bit more limited in what you can do to these things. But that doesn't mean we can't do it, and what we're going to do to this 3DO today is install something called an optical drive emulator. This will allow me to boot the entire games library off of a USB stick, which in this case it's going to be a USB stick with an SD card hooked up to it. Now I got this off AliExpress. As you can see, the Raspberry Pi Pico is already pre-soldered to this thing, so there's actually no soldering that I'm going to have to do, which is nice. Now another issue with the more obscure consoles is informational modifications is a little bit harder to come by, so for my research this should be ready to go once we get it hooked up. We will see once we get it hooked up. But let's go ahead and get this bad boy disassembled. Now, I have never disassembled one of these before, so I am going in a little blind, but from the looks of it, there's about 4 screws here on each leg that I have to get at. Now, one of the interesting things about the 3DO, and also one of the reasons that it was a failure, is that 3DO was actually licensing out the rights to make this console to different manufacturers. So what wound up happening is we got very different variations of the 3DO console. This variation is called the FZ1 variation. The FZ10 is the other common variation. There are also other variations beyond those, but those two are probably the most common. And while they do all play the same games, they do all look very different. And disassembly might be very different. I don't know. Like I said, I've never actually disassembled a 3DO before. But what I do know is that the optical drive emulator that you have to get a hold of has to correspond to the model that you have. I know that there are FZ1 and FZ10 optical drive emulators out there, but for the other variations of the 3DO, I have to be honest, I'm not sure. And could I Google that and research for this video so that you have all the information you need? I could, but one thing you should know about me is that I'm extremely lazy and I'm not going to do that. Okay, and now that we've done that, the lid of this thing should just pop off. We're going to do it carefully though, because I don't want to damage anything by accident. Good sounds always. Okay, so next we're going to have to get this shielding off here, and I think that's as far as we're going to need to go, which is kind of a relief. And that is exactly where I needed to get. I needed to get to these ribbon cables right here. So we're going to unhook these ribbon cables right here, nice and gently, I might add. There's one, and there's 2. So the optical drive emulator and the USB stick that's going to have the SD card that's going to have all my games loaded to it is going to sit right here nice and snugly. It's actually a perfect little fit here. As you can see, there's 2 different modes on this thing. There's a CD-ROM mode and an ODE mode. I will be leaving